Okay, we're at a turning point now with this VFR. I replaced the wax idle, which I thought could have been faulty. It just wasn't settling down in idle, so I picked up this throttle body. There was only one on eBay. Picked this one up. Luckily, the wax things you can see here, you can see they both rise, but one rises slightly more than the other. You can hear the idle now sits absolutely spot on. You can now get on with restoration. Absolutely spot on. This VFR is now up. There's a bit of a drama getting it up the stairs, but we've got it. So with this one, we're going to start the restoration. We're going to take the panels off, and then we're going to take the panels from the other VFR, which are there, and the tank and all that, and then we're going to do restoration all in one hit. So while I'm doing that, I'm going to go into this one and change the oil, do the spark plugs, do all those bits, check the chain, all that sort of stuff, brake calipers, fluids, and get this bike ready to accept the new panels. And then that should be the restoration done for these two motorbikes. So hopefully there are no horrible gremlins in here. I'm expecting issues. So if I complain, then you can hold me to it. But I think this one should be as expected. Since 2000 it's been ridden a lot, so there will be some things worn, but we expect that. That's a bonus. More Alright, I'm just going to do a code check, see what this bike's history is, and we'll clear them, and then we'll turn the power on again and see which sensors are causing any problems. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 9. So to clear the codes, to check the new ones, we're going to turn the ignition on, quickly come here, in about 5 seconds, take one side out, put it back in within the 5 seconds, and then the FI light should flash. If it flashes, it means it's cleared the codes. I turn the ignition off, take the pin out, turn the ignition back on again, and we should see whatever we see. So there's the flashing light. So we turn the ignition off, take the pins out, and let's see what codes we have. Alright, that's cleared. So now we put the pin back in again to read what new codes we have. The error codes only show when you check the service indicator. People forget that. Unless it's a very bad issue, this is what we do to check to see where they have error codes. Right. Let's check now. Okay, there are no error codes. That's great news. This bike is good. Cool. But I'm just going to check the state of the stator, because on the other VFR this is still fresh in my memory, so I'm going to share this with you. We're going to do a continuity check. So we want to put on something like that. Check one against the other. Zero, that's good. One pin against the other, that should be zero. And one pin to the other, that should be zero. Good, status good. The rectifier is slightly more complicated, but certainly not that complicated. I just have to say, if you really want to get into the detail of why you do the test this way, you want to go onto YouTube's channel called Kev's Shed. Kev Shed is a really helpful guy on VFRs, and he will explain to you why we do the test this way. But for expedience sake, we just want to get on and check to see if this is okay. So just follow. Here you can see you've got 2 greens and 2 red and whites. The 2 greens are exactly the same. Honda just doubles them up for some reason. So what we're going to do is put a crocodile clip on the green line. Any one of those greens is fine. And then we're going to check to see whether we get a current through any one of these. On this configuration of positive going to negative on the green, for whatever reason, it doesn't matter, and you'll see in a minute, there should be no reading at all. Okay, there should be nothing. But if I swap over these and I check the same things, I should get a reading. Okay, and I should get a reading. And they should be fairly close to each other. I should get a reading. Okay, so that's the green. Now the red and white. Just make sure the crocodile clips are nice and tight. Again, doesn't matter whether it's reading or not reading. They should all not read or all read. So let's see. That's a not read, not read, not read. Okay, then we swap these over. You should get readings. Yes, reading, reading, reading. This regulator is all good. It's missing its little clips. So that's come off. Nice. Wow, I wasn't expecting that. Very good. Just spotted a missing vacuum. Oh man, this wasn't even screwed in properly. Look alright. Wow, that was scary. That switch didn't work. Even when I turned the ignition off, that just kept firing on. Not good. When working on a VFR or any motorcycle as complicated as this, you really have to be pretty tenacious and brave and exploratory to be able to find some of these difficult problems that reside in these bikes. Through all the years that these bikes have been owned by different people, people have done different things in order to make them work, not necessarily the right things, and in particular the wiring. If the wiring is being converted to work with something else, like for example this relay here, which looks just like any other relay from this particular motorcycle, when this jammed on me and the engine just kept on spinning, the issue was quite simple. The solenoid inside had, or the points had arced and then had not separated. Because as you can see here, you've got the high voltage plugs, and then you've got the switch plugs which activate the points to connect and then link the two. If you get these two main wires crossed over, the bike doesn't blow up, but what it does do is everything just dies. Nothing switches on. Your dash lights don't go on. There's no life in the bike. This particular shout out to a company called Motorcycle Products Limited. The owner and founder called Arnie. He had supplied me with no less than 2 starter relays, and I'd had trouble with them. I couldn't get them to work, and without any quibble he just kept sending me different ones, or the same one, and they still didn't work. So he asked me to send him a photograph. I sent him a picture. He looked at me, and with his keen eye he said that the connectors on the original solenoid, which was working on this bike until it jammed, which is the reason I wanted to replace it, he had pointed out that they were incorrect. So if I swapped the leads around, that would work. It was really nice of him to do that, instead of just asking me to send them back and refund me. He wanted to try and help me. So Motorcycle Products Limited, please look them up in the UK. Really good prices, very quick on delivery. I am not sponsored by them or anything. I just think when I do get a good service, and I'm ordering all these parts, that I think it's really worthwhile giving guys like these a shout out. They really try hard, and they're not there to mess you around, they're there to try and help you. So what I'm going to do now with this VFR is it's all running fine, but because I've got this off, I'm going to take the throttle body off. I'm pretty quick at it now with the other bike, so this one should be fairly easy. That's going to come off. I'm going to get my seals, injector seals, from the same company I had received them from, and much cheaper than anywhere else. Fantastic service. Go and look them up. They're called mrinjectors.co.uk. I think that's the name. Just check it out. So the injectors will be checked and then cleaned, new filters put in, and then I'm going to just service the whole throttle body area, give that a good clean out. She's running a little rougher than the 2001 VFR. So I'd like to get her sweet, and then we can get on with the restoration of this one too. In fact, that doesn't slow down the restoration. It just means that these are some of the things I have to do while those panels are being painted. This is the choke version. Well, it's not a choke, but it's a idle speed adjuster on cold. One of the ways you can get these rubbers off a little easier is by spraying some lubricant on them early. So we'll do that. What a great riff this is. This is foreplay. Nathan East plays with everyone. Let's get back to work. I'm going to take the thermostat out because I'm here. I'm going to check all the plugs. It's going to go through everything because I don't really want to open this up again. You know, this is just a testament to how good these VFRs are. Look at this. These are the injectors. This is going to be the first time I get into the idle pin. You can see they move back and forth. This feels a little sticky. Okay, so I've used a number 10 spanner, taken this first one out just to see. I always wondered whether I'd lose the setting that was on here already. But as you can see, there is a thread and a spring there, right? This setting hasn't moved, but I'm still able to take this off. So there's your answer. You still maintain your setting. Not that you're going to keep it, because you really want to do a carb synchronization after you've done this. But this gives you an indication of that you're not going to create an unstartable motorcycle by removing this. I'm going to use this degreaser, and I'm assuming by all accounts that this We are now going to take off the head of both sides, and I'm going to do a valve check. I think we're right here at the business end. When the throttle body's on, you can't get to it. So let's do it now. I've ordered the incredibly expensive thermostats. There are very few of them around because they're off-centered thermostats. I'm not sure if anybody can tell me where you can find a thermostat that would fit the VFR. That's where you could find one in the UK. Let me know, because they're about £60 or £50 each, which is quite a lot plus postage. You're looking at, with the seal, you're looking at £75 all round, which is more than I pay for a whole throttle body. So yeah, that's a sting right there. But anyway, we're going to take the head off. I'm going to check the valve clearances, because I've got a suspicion that the valve clearance, particularly on one of the cylinders, is showing a low PSI, which could be the case that it's actually staying open for too long, and therefore the compression is a little lower than the others. But you should check them anyway. I think correct me if I'm wrong, was it 30 or 40,000 miles on these? You should have them checked anyway. And what they are, basically what happens is the valve seat that's inside the head, as it wears, it goes further into the head, therefore exposing the shaft itself out to poke out further, a little bit further. So basically what happens is, as the cam turns, that little shaft now is sticking further out and has less movement, right? And not only that, it's open for longer. Think about that, it's open for longer. So what you have to do is, you have to take the little shim now. In these modern motorcycles, you have little discs, they're called shims, tappet shims, or rocker shims. And you've got to order a smaller one to compensate for the amount of wear that the valve has made. So the valve itself, the seal of the valve might be fine, but the valve shaft is too close to the cam and therefore not quite closing when the piston is a top dead, and there should be no leak, is now leaking. So even though it's little, it's enough to create a performance difference. So we're going to strip that out, use the feeler gauge, check to see how we're doing with that, and then we finished with the engine pretty much. I'm not going to strip the engine out for any purposes. It's actually not a good thing to be stripping engines with all the threads and the torquing and so on and so forth. If an engine's not leaking or is not showing any signs of wear, you should ride it until it does. That's my opinion anyway. A restoration is a slightly different thing, where you would strip everything off and check. But this is not a restoration in the true sense of the word. This is a reconstitution of a good motorcycle where there's very little to wear on them other than the obvious things, which I'm sure myself and other VFR web channels have shown. So let's get on with it, and hopefully we'll get done. In the meantime, the restoration work is going ahead. We're fairly busy in the high season now at CarbonBikeRepair, so things are slowing down a little bit as far as that's concerned, but we still try and get as much stuff through to entertain you with. No doubt these bikes will look absolutely amazing. Bear in mind, I've got one, I've got two, so there's the other one. Every point there it is there. So that was the original one I bought, and this is the one that I'm busy restoring now. So I'm a very lucky guy, I've got two VFRs. This is such a beautifully made engine. Absolutely no wear on these at all. Each time I work on this bike, I fall more in love with it as I go through it. It is just superbly built. So there's the marks. That'll tell us where top dead center is for each piston. So I've saved you the hassle taking off the heads, because I think there's enough online about how you do that on the VFR, and I'm not going to go through that with you. For the purposes of this, I'm going to keep it really simple, because I found that a lot of the tutorials online are either to do with the Gen 6. I certainly haven't found one on the Generation 5. And the reason why it's important to do one on the Gen 5 is because This is not the VTEC valve system, and the VTEC has a chain, and this is a gear. So there'll be slight differences to those. So I'm going to start off now by just explaining to you what we do. It's not that difficult. It really isn't that difficult. Taking off these bits and pieces is tricky. But once you've got the throttle body off and all that, why the hell not get stuck in? So here we are. We've taken the cover off this fella here. I'm just going to shine a light on here and you'll see a whole bunch of numbers. Okay. So you see in this particular instance, 2T and then a line. That line is where you should be focusing on. That's all you need to worry about for this particular exercise. And there you just line it up with that slot. So this is how it goes. 1, 3, 2, 4. So what we want to do is get it to top dead center. Now if you look at this cryptic drawing here that they've given us, it's a whole bunch of funny little squiggles here. And you'll see printed very carefully on the actual gears are little spline lines, little lines. Those will give you an indication of where it should be. This valve lube is pointing up, and this one is pointing up, is now at its shallowest, which means it's going to create that little gap that we're looking for. Okay, 40, and that is one rotate. If you rotate it again, that same position, those loops will be in a different position. So you've only got 2 goes at it. One is wrong, the other circle 360 degrees up is correct. Those loops are pointing upwards, and according to this drawing here, that line, the lines marked on the gears, one points this way and the other one points that way. There's the line there, and obviously the other line is there. Don't worry about this circlip thing. On the drawing it shows a circlip position, and sometimes that can get you confused on the manual. Just forget about those things. Will move around at will. It's those little lines that you need to mark on. So the next thing is going to be is to get the feeler gauge into that. I've put a bend in the feeler gauge so that I can get it in much easier, because what you want is the feeler gauge to go in between the bucket and the loop. That mustn't be forced in and forced out. Likewise, it mustn't be wobbly. It's got to go in nice and smoothly when you can estimate through your instinct that that is snug. It's fitting nicely. Now, how do I tell the difference between an exhaust valve and an inlet valve? Well, it's actually quite simple. There's your exhaust pipe, right? There's the valve for the exhaust pipe. There's the injector or carburetor, whatever you want to call it, and therefore the corresponding valve for that. So in this case, we're going to be looking for the spec here, which is in millimeters. I work in millimeters here, is 0.16. I don't have 1/6 on my feeler gauge, but I got 0.15 millimeters. So that'll give me enough of an indication, because I have some tolerance allowances which keep the valve height gap in spec. So I can go from as low down as 0.13 millimeters to 0.19 millimeters being the largest gap. So I'm using 1.5. That should certainly be enough within spec. You can hear it touching, and it's very snug. I'm not forcing it. It's definitely clear. That is definitely not going in. So our measurements for number 4 in is 0.13. Now that is in tolerance, but it's just in tolerance. I might change that out anyway, because I'm here and it's literally on its last. So I'm going to say no. I'm going to change that. What's the tolerance? Well, you can do your maths. It's very simple. It's 0.03 out. Okay, because it should be 0.16 is the sort of medium. So 0.03 is the gap that is out. That's how much tolerance out it is. So the exhaust valve gap is always bigger. Why? Because it gets hotter. So it expands more. And that's why the gap is bigger. Make sure you've only got one feeler gauge. I know that sounds crazy, but I have spotted sometimes I've had two very thin shim next to it. You can see that. It's obviously jerking around. It's not because it's stiff, it's just because it's got to be absolutely lined up. There we go. See, that's 0.3, so that's well within spec. So let's look at these numbers. Okay, let's put that down so that we remember what we did here. 0.30, which is correct. Now this is my little, very simple, simplified board. So these are my findings. With the spec for the inlet valves for all four, they should be, inlet valves should be 0.16 millimeters, with a tolerance as small a gap as 0.13 to a largest gap of 0.19. Now you'd only be worried about that number if you get the wrong new shim put in under the bucket. But most likely it's all, the number's almost always going to be smaller. The gap's going to get smaller because of the wear on the valve. As the valve seat wears over time, the stem pushes through and higher up against the loop, and therefore the gap narrows. It's kind of obvious. So on this particular bike, this cylinder 1 is in spec. Cylinder 3, which is next to it on the back bank, the exhaust valve is out. So that one is out by 0.05. On number 2, I've got the exhaust valve is out by the same, and the inlet valve is exactly the same as 1. And 4, I've got my inlet valve, which is out, but my exhaust valve is in. So there isn't really a pattern to these. You've got to measure and check each one, and don't assume just because one bank is problematic that the others won't be or will be. You've got to check them all. Inlet 178.